going along with those vegetable seedlings. So that's also the use of this cocoa pit medium, how you actually sell and then grow and then sell those seedlings at an affordable cost. And this technology and practice information actually provided the farmers that were involved with a much earlier harvest for some crops, and it can lead to a price advantage at the time of sale. What was interesting though was that the use of the types of crops that were used as the seedlings in these particular hubs and the varieties as well were trialled by the Syngenta Foundation's research teams prior to being deployed to the different hubs. So there was a certain degree of optimization for local conditions that had already occurred before farmers got access to these seedlings. And I think this does contribute in some way to reducing the risk of adoption, especially for some younger and perhaps less experienced farmers that were the hub participants. So we found that the hub participants were able to increase their production and slightly shift their farm incomes over the time period that we examined. And we examined a very short time period from 2018 to 2021. We found that a greater proportion of the hub participants actually said that their productivity had increased, usually through the adoption moving from the use of seeds to the use of seedlings, whereas some of the non-participants said their productivity had marginally increased throughout that time period. So not a huge difference, but definitely a shift there. The fact that they had not only shifted from seeds to seedlings, but also those crop varieties that had already been tried and optimized for the local conditions, we think were really one of the areas here that is quite interesting. And given the relatively young age of the farmers who are participants in the hub, I think this is actually a pretty big change for their particular farming systems. And I think it demonstrates one of the harder to measure aspects of participation in the hub or other collective groups. And that's around the de-risking of practice change through support and knowledge. So I suppose I'd like to know from other people in the meeting today about if they've got other examples of where collectives and groups of farmers have been able to de-risk both the adoption process itself and also if there's parallels we can draw for the adoption process that I know has been examined in a little bit more detail for CASI in the same region of Bangladesh. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarina. Again, very much aligned with other people, but specific contribution. Does anyone want to make a comment? I am always interested in the discussions around collectives because it's such a culturally loaded topic to get farmers to work together. There are cultures where it's easy to do and cultures where it's actually very difficult. But the observation about de-risking is really very important. Any comment from the floor? Okay, then, oh yes, go ahead, Mr. Wakilur, Dr. Wakilur.
Thank you. Thank you for giving the opportunity. This is Wakil from Bangladesh Agriculture University. So thank you, Sarina, for your nice presentation. One thing I would like to highlight. So like Sarina said that optimize the seedling business. So in that area, what we see that Syngenta Foundation has the research and development sector, or maybe there is one area of Syngenta Foundation. So what they do, actually they bring all sort of seeds and they do such kind of trial over there. Once they find this particular seed is working well, because many seed companies are working together. So then they recommend the hubs to grow these particular seeds. So they are not biased within a particular specific companies, rather they do try and then they recommend. This is where I think this is really important.
Yeah, I thank you very much. I think one of the important element of this is to have the technical research very reliable and robust before you get into the hubs. Thank you, Sarina. Thank you, Wakil. We're moving on to Dr. Apurba in West Bengal, who, as you heard on Friday, has had a very tremendous success in dealing with policymakers in his home state. So Apurba, can you comment on how you present complex and sound experimental results to policymakers to obtain their support for scaling?
Thank you, Eric. I'm trying to narrate the scaling pathway as well as the sustainability of the CASI technology in West Bengal. Though the SRFSI project was started in 2014, but the actual scaling was started from 2016 onwards. In West Bengal, a network of actors comprising of agriculture universities, that is the UBKB, Uttar Banga Krishi Vishwavidyalaya or North Bengal Agriculture University, international research organizations, extension agents like Department of Agriculture and Farmers Group work together through participatory field trials, capacity development, supply chain, as well as the policy dialogues. The unified aim was to scale the Kasi technology in the state. So far, more than 135,000 farming households are using Kasi technology, but the actual number is much more because we could not capture the whole data because with our limited sources. And by adopting this technology, you know that Kasi has many advantages like increased profitability, increased productivity. We observed or we recorded 20% higher irrigation productivity in different cropping systems, particularly during the prolonged dry spell, and increasing the number of the youths in the service provisions. And besides these quantifiable changes, some quality aspects were also recorded. In this project, we have taken a very strong decision and strategical decision to involve the farm females in all project activities. So some changes were recorded. First change is the changes in the decision-making context of the farm families. What we have seen that more than 50% decisions are jointly taken by the husband and wife where the Kasi has been adopted. Number two, empowerment of the farm women, particularly the rice seedling factory, vegetables nursery, and utilizations of the excess rice residues for mushroom cultivation. You know that in this continent, there is a rice crops rotation. So there is an enough scope for rice seedlings that are essentially required for mechanical rice transplanter. And we recorded that in Kasi adopted villages, 15% of the farm women are self-reliant. And number third is the self-confidence build-up. And this is due to the sustained interaction and exposures of the national partners and also the international partners. Now I am trying to tell about how the SRFSI projects facilitates the scaling as well as the sustainability. The network that I have been mentioned is such type of network was limited or rather absent. Here, the Agriculture University worked very closely with State Department of Agriculture, and which was the integral part to fostering trust in academic results. And further, it has been coupled with technical backstopping from international research organizations. Number two, the engagement with the government officials and policymakers through different multiple channels such as workshops, policy dialogues, and high-level meetings at all levels. As a result, state government has made some policy changes. They have made CA machineries is a compulsory part in the new custom hiring center. You will be happy to know that this year they have listed 19 machines for custom hiring center, and out of the 19 machines, 12 machines contributes towards the conservation agriculture. And they have funded for Center on Conservation Agriculture at UBKB. And further, they are providing assistance to the women self-help group for the rice seedling factory. And in each district, they are providing 5 numbers to provide the assistance. At local level also, you will find that extension agents, they have used different national flagship programs like Agriculture Technology Management Agency, in brief it is ATMA, National Food Security Mission, to promote conservation agriculture. As a result, out of the 23 districts, 18 districts are now using the conservation agriculture to promote Kasi technology through convergence of the government programs. So my conclusion is that the approach used here have contributed to scaling and long-term sustainability of the conservation agriculture in this state. And this may be provide a key learning for successful approaches that can be used elsewhere, particularly where similar socioeconomic situation exists. That's all right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Apurba. Thank you. I will, just to give enough time for the reviewers to make comments, I will move on directly to Brendan, who just will summarize from the previous presentation. We heard the diversity of scaling approach that has been undertaken in SDIP project. Brendan?
Thanks, Eric. You can
Thank
hear
you
me?
very much. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I've probably gone a little bit higher in my response here around what we learned from scaling, but just a few quick points. And Apurba, you've stolen a bit of my thunder as well, so you've cut my time a little shorter. The first one is, we talked about scaling. Apurba mentioned the timeframes there. I think we learned that you can't scale at the end. These scaling variations that come along, there's simply not enough time. So starting that process at the start was really important. And you can hear from Apurba that doing that did help us create some momentum, but it can't just be left to the end. Second point, in the second phase of SURFC, we focused really intently on capacity development as the pathway to institutionalization. I would say that we learned that that in isolation is not feasible to enact change. And particularly to bring in an example in West Bengal, is that the ATMA scheme gives agricultural block officers a lot of autonomy as to how they manage their blocks. So the targeted training of block officers, and in combination with their ability to actually enact change, was really useful. If you look at the other experiences where block officers were trained, but they had no autonomy or decision-making power, we had a lot less success. In those experiences, we had to go to a higher level to create that change and to enable scaling. Third point, diversity definitely reigns supreme. So there is not a scaling strategy that works regionally. You look at all the learnings we have around information systems, training system, what works where, who wants to be trained by who. We have to consider that if we're working on regional projects, scaling across the region actually involves a lot of smaller scaling strategies that may not actually piece together very well. And the final point, continuing to work off Apurba there, is SURFC had this idea that we were scaling across the whole region. Now, what we found was you get success in one location, places like Cooch Behar, in one block, and that scales out to those surrounding blocks, and it's actually a snowball scaling. So this idea that we can scale across a whole region was actually, our learning was that if you can get it working in a place and then slowly snowball out from that, it's probably a more likely and realistic scaling approach. Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, and that's consistent with the diversity you just said. Thank you very much, Brendan. We have a few minutes to go, so rather than address more questions, I'd like to ask Christian and Kate whether they want to ask specific questions of interest on that topic now. And we can spend the next 4 minutes on this without any problem.
I might just go forward. It's probably not an explicit question, just an observation at this stage. What strikes me listening to the 4 or 5 different perspectives is there's a richness and a very different suite of perspectives around mechanization / scaling across a number of projects. And I guess, you know, recognizing that that's only just coming to the fore, my question back to the SDIP team would be, in what way and how would you intend to synthesize some of that stuff across the various perspectives? We've heard a lot of the individual perspectives, but I haven't yet seen how all of those different threads can be perhaps generalized a little bit more.
Thank you. Yes, I think we can recognize that between the role of collectives, the connection to markets or financing, or the ideas of giving operators a different job, there are lots of elements which mesh into one another. Kate, do you want to, was this of interest to you, this scaling discussion?
Yeah, it was of interest. Thanks, Eric. And I just want to table an apology to those here. I've got my video off because of coming in and out of hearing, and if it's off, it's better. So I just want you to know I'm very present to the discussion. I guess, like Christian, less a question. I just think some really important reflections are coming to the fore around, you know, where we start projects, you know, having a full appreciation of building on what's already there, and timing. Two things really struck me. The comments around the uptake of seedlings building on work done by the Syngenta Foundation. And I just don't think we can just gloss over things like that. The reliability and the robustness of those results, but also the trust probably in those results, they take time. So that just really struck me. And the other one is I'm really appreciating the reflection that scaling starts at the beginning and it takes time. And I do think we've got, yeah, that'll be something that we can fold into, you know, when we synthesize this, how that might be incorporated. So yeah, no, really interesting discussion across all five. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't want to be the person who puts the whole session out of whack in terms of timing. There would be a lot more to talk about, and apologies for those who could not ask their questions. We have our research officer, Belinda Nelson, who is keeping a very close eye on the chat, and so we'll have a documentation of all what you raised and couldn't raise in words on the system. There's discussion about four-wheel tractors, the difference between supply and demand for the service, and the need to make mechanization profitable. There are lots of interesting things there. So I will close there and pass on to Tamara for the next panel.